This video was brought to you by Nebula. When Kamala Harris took over from Joe Biden late last month, Democrats were nervous. Harris had some pretty miserable approval ratings herself, and the substitution could easily have exacerbated the infighting that had beset the Democrats for the prior few weeks. Unfortunately for the Republicans, though, the Democrats quickly unified around Harris. Her approval ratings skyrocketed, and in the past couple of days, a series of polls and bookies suggest that she might actually have overtaken Trump to become the odds-on favorite to win in November. So in this video, we're going to take a look at the latest polls and forecasts, why Trump is flagging, and how things might pan out in the coming months before the election. Before we start, if you haven't already, please consider subscribing and ringing the bell to stay in the loop and be notified when we release new videos. So, let's start by taking a look at the polls. We're not going to look at every individual poll here, but rather a combination of poll aggregators, prediction markets, and forecasting sites, which are all generally more reliable than individual polls. Let's start by looking at the aggregators, which combine together loads of different polls for an overall picture. Perhaps the most famous polling aggregator in American politics is the one by Nate Silver, the founder of 538. Silver became famous for correctly predicting basically every state that Obama would win in 2008, and he's had a pretty good record since. While he didn't get the 2016 election right, he still gave Trump a 30% chance of winning, way higher than most other pollsters, and correctly predicted the 2020 election. Anyway, Silver's aggregator had Harris ahead in the popular vote since late July, but over the weekend she actually overtook Trump in the Electoral College too, and now has a higher than 50% chance of winning in November. The Economist poll aggregator says something similar too. The Economists have had Harris ahead of Trump in the popular vote basically ever since she took over from Biden, and now they give her a 3-point lead over Trump. This is pretty astonishing too, given that they gave Trump a 4-point lead over Biden before Harris stepped in, and a 3-point lead would almost definitely be enough to win the Electoral College. On top of this, prediction markets, which are basically betting platforms for political events, and have reliably proved more accurate than the polls when it comes to forecasting, now give Harris the edge. While Polymarket, the biggest crypto-based prediction site in the US, still gives Trump a slight lead, PredictIt, a New Zealand-based market, gives Harris a slight but expanding lead, with the implied odds of her winning in November coming in at about 54% as of Wednesday morning. It's also worth mentioning that there are reasons to be skeptical of Polymarket's data here. Because it skews towards crypto users, who are generally more Trump, in part because he's recently suggested doing things like using bitcoins to pay off national debt, whatever that means, it's likely that sites like that will be slightly skewed towards Trump. Similarly, forecasting websites, which basically let individual users or forecasters predict outcomes and then come up with an aggregate weighting predictions based on their users' previous forecast accuracy, now give Harris a slight lead, with one major site giving her a 51% chance of winning in the Electoral College. Anyway, you get the point. Things are still very, very close. But Harris clearly has made up ground against Trump and is arguably the odds-on favorite to win. So how did this actually happen? Well, as we see it, there are at least 3 reasons. The first is that Harris and the Democrats have successfully dominated the news cycle, which is something that Trump is usually good at. By swapping out Biden so soon after Trump's assassination attempt, and then stretching out the vice president selection process, Harris and the Democrats have been able to hog the news cycle for the past month or so, giving Harris the chance to improve her name recognition. We can expect Harris and her new running mate Tim Walz to continue to dominate the headlines for most of August as well, given that they're currently on a campaign tour of battleground states this week, and then there's the Democratic convention the week after next. Anyway, this is all particularly impressive given that Biden basically handed the news cycle to Trump, presumably because he thought that turning voters' attention to Trump's criminal record and the controversial rhetoric from him would help the Democrats in November. Now, to be fair, this did sort of work in 2020, when Biden allowed Trump to hog the news cycle, drawing attention to his mishandling of the pandemic and general disarray. But this stopped working this time round, because Trump just spent his airtime successfully attacking Biden's age and apparent incompetence, especially over the economy and the border. Losing control of the airwaves to Harris has apparently spooked Trump, who's resorted to more and more extreme rhetoric in an attempt to draw the media's attention back to him. Instead of talking about inflation or immigration, for instance, which was something the voters generally agreed with him on, Trump has started questioning whether it's possible to be black and Indian at the same time, or trying out increasingly ill-judged nicknames like Kamala or West Coast wannabe Tim Walz. Second, it's not just the media cycle though. Harris has also moderated her politics to appeal to independent and swing voters, who will ultimately end up deciding the election. To give just a few examples, Harris has said that she no longer supports a fracking ban, a federal job guarantee, or a single-payer healthcare system, all policies she's previously endorsed. Leaving aside the question of whether these are actually good policies, it's good politics, insofar as it signals to swing voters that she's not the hyper-liberal progressive that Trump and his acolytes claim. So far, this hasn't apparently hurt her standing among more progressive voters, who, at least at the time of polling, are still very keen on her. Her pick of VP Tim Walz might also help her here. He presents moderate, so might not spook swing voters, but more politically engaged lefties will both notice and appreciate his progressive legislative record. Which leads us nicely onto the third reason. Democrats have also become more unified over the past few weeks, while Republicans, well, they've done the opposite. Progressive Democrats have apparently accepted Harris's tacking to the right on certain issues as a necessary cost for keeping Donald Trump out of power, while Republicans, who previously looked impressively united in their total support for Trump, have split as Trump has turned his attention towards more controversial issues. In response to Harris's climbing poll numbers, Trump tried to disavow the more extreme parts of his policy platform, including most notably the Heritage Foundation's Project 2025. But this did irk parts of his MAGA base. On the other hand, Trump's more recent attempts to focus on Harris's heritage and weird nicknames have irked more moderate Republicans, who want to focus on bread and butter issues that might win them the election. Infighting between Trump and conventional conservatives has also spilled out into the open. On Saturday, Trump attacked Georgia Governor Brian Kemp, who is substantially more popular in Georgia than Trump is, claiming that he wouldn't be governor without Trump, that he was very bad for the Republican Party, and even suggested that Georgia could get a better governor. Ultimately, while this race is still basically a toss-up, unless Trump can get voters' attention back to the border crisis and the economy, Harris looks well-placed come November. Now, you can keep diving deeper into this and other news stories over on Nebula, where the TLDR team curates the most important news videos from around the world, saving you from a deluge of bad news and helping you pay attention to what really matters. This means no more feeling out of touch. On Nebula News, the TLDR team act as your guide through the media landscape, sharing the news that we're paying attention to and helping you to find the stories that matter and avoid burnout. Now, if you don't know already, Nebula is a streaming service that we co-own with a bunch of your favorite creators. There, you can watch original content like Real Life Law's incredible series War Room, which every month runs you through a whole load of ongoing conflicts, keeping you in the loop. You can also watch every TLDR video on Nebula ad-free, and in many instances, before they land on YouTube. If you're not a member already, then you can click the link in the description to sign up now. And if you do, you'll get 40% off an annual plan by using our link. Plus, Nebula will know that you came from us, which really helps us out. We've got some great feedback from existing members on the Nebula News features, so I hope you enjoy the effort that we're putting into Nebula News.